Okay, guys, it's part two of the penguin video. So we're going to try to get the penguin finished in this part. And so we need to make a beak. And I'm going to go ahead and create a cube to make my beak. So object mode, shift a new mesh cube. And the cube's too big, so we're going to shrink it way down. And I'll go ahead and put it here. And I'll switch to side view with the 3 pad, number pad 3. Stick it about there. And so I don't want it to be symmetrical. Instead, we're going to build the mouth using, we do want it to be symmetrical, but we're going to use mirror mode. So I'm only going to stick it on this side of the head for now. So I'm going to add a mirror modifier to it. And there it is. All right. So I'll set the mirror object to the body. And I want to give it some merge. So what merge is going to do is if it gets close together, it will snap together and become one. And I want that around 0.1. So it has to get pretty close together before it snaps together and becomes one thing. All right, so what I'm going to do to get this nose, this beak, looking like a beak, I'm going to go ahead and name that, by the way. So let's call this thing top beak. Top beak. And let's go ahead and what's this other cube here? Oh, feet. Let's go ahead and name that feet. Okay, so now top beak, we need to shape it. And before I shape it, I'm going to go into edit mode. And I'm going to throw on horizontal and a vertical loop cut. There's my loop cuts. Okay. So now it's probably going to be best if I go ahead and hide the body, hide the eyes, I'll hide the empty reference image, and I'll hide the eyes, get them out of the way. And okay, so going into 7 view, what I want to do is make sure I have wireframe on so that I can box select and get the front, the top, and bottom at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the center here, this one, and kind of pull it out, create the nose, and I'll go ahead and hit Y so I only move it straight up and down. And then I'm going to grab this back section. Remember, when I box select, I'm getting top and bottom at the same time. And I'll pull that out a little bit. And then I'm going to grab this one, kind of pull it like that, and this one, kind of pull it like that. And since we're going to use subdivision surface on this, we want this to maybe be a little bit more pointy and exaggerated than we really actually want it to be. Okay, something like that looks pretty good. And yeah, that looks like a pretty good shape. That will work just fine for our top beak, except for I want the beak not to be flat on top. So one last thing, I'll go to the one view and I'll box select and I'll grab this entire middle row here and just hit G and Z and kind of raise up the middle row a little bit. And then I'll make sure I grab the very front and I'll hit G and Z and lower that and kind of bring it down to a point. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So going back to solid mode to take a look at it. Yep, that'll work for a beak. And yeah, very good. So what we're going to do now is add another modifier, subdivision surface, which is going to make it all nice and round. Go ahead and I'll bring back everything. Don't really need that reference image right now. There we go. Okay, so it's a little big. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and just scale the whole thing down. If you start scaling without applying the modifiers, and it's not going to work. I'm going to go ahead and apply the modifiers. And you need to do the mirror first, and then the subdivision. And then I'm going to go ahead and scale those down a little bit. And anytime you apply a mirror modifier on your object, the origin point is going to be on the original object, not the new combined object. So I need to set the origin to geometry. And then I can scale that down, and I can also center it, get it really good and centered on the face. And I can also kind of shrink it in a way by just kind of burying it inside the head a little bit, inside the body like that. I need to duplicate this thing. I'll Shift D and duplicate it. And I need to just flip that over 180 degrees. So that's going to be on the Y-axis. So rotate Y 180. That's going to flip it over, scale it down a little bit, and I'll just stick it inside the mouse, get it nice inside the top beak. All right, so that looks good enough. That'll work just fine. So I got a top beak, and I'll rename that bottom beak. So those are 2 beaks. Okay, so now we need to do our, and while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and shade those smooth. There we go, looks good. Okay, Now we need eyebrows. Eyebrows are real easy. So to make eyebrows, we're gonna make a mesh cube and we're gonna make it really long. So I'm gonna go ahead and scale it way down, and then I'm gonna scale it on the X and stretch it out. And then I'm gonna go ahead and move it up here, and I'll use a combination of 1 and the 3 buttons to get it kind of above the eye. G to move, put it there. 1, scale it down, and I want to get it right about there. And of course, I'm also going to need to make it fit the curve of the head. So I'll hit the 7 view and rotate it a little bit and kind of get it even with the eyeball, even with the head. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now to make that actually look like an eyebrow, I need to do 2 things. I need to go ahead and add in edit mode some loop cuts. 3 loop cuts is all we need. And then we're going to use X-ray mode and grab one of the ends. So I'm getting the 4 vertices on the end, vertice select. And I want to turn on proportional editing. If I just rotate it, you see, okay, that doesn't do a whole lot. But if I turn on proportional editing and rotate it, then I'm rotating the entire eyebrow. So I can kind of move it, rotate it, and shape it the way I want. I want to rotate that now a little bit. You can move it around, shape it. As long as you use proportional editing and get the whole thing in there, you can kind of shape it really easily. All right, that looks pretty good. And we'll be able to animate this eyebrow so it's not locked in that one position. So that's good. I'm gonna go back to object mode now, and I'm gonna apply a mirror modifier so I have a symmetrical one on the other side of the body like that. And then I'm gonna also apply a subdivision surface modifier that will make it nice and curvy. So yep, that looks good. Put them right where I want them. That looks great. Okay, so one last thing to build, and that is some hair. And we can actually kind of make this do double duty. So if I'll go ahead and set the origin to geometry on that, and then I'm going to duplicate it, and these can become hair. So on this new one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to name this eyebrow, or just brow, and I'm going to name this hair. So instead of just making a new one, I'll just repurpose this to be hair. I'm going to delete the mirror though, get rid of the mirror. I will keep the subdivision though on this. So I'm going to rotate it and kind of put it right there, and then use the 3 view, rotate it again, get it kind of straight up and down. And I'm going to have this kind of just sticking out of his head like that. Yeah, all right, very good. So now if I want to kind of maybe give it, just since it is hair, maybe make it a little bit pointier before I start duplicating this one. So I'll get it kind of right where I want it, and then go into edit mode and just make it kind of get a little bit pointier. I'm going to grab those 4 vertices and scale them down a little bit, and turn proportional editing down like that just a little bit, something about like that. I might scale these down a little bit too, scale these down just a little bit. So this is going to be kind of like a feather, sort of stylized feather hair type thing. Looks good. Okay, so now I can Shift D, duplicate that, and I'll use the 7 view to rotate it and stick it maybe there. And you could make 2 or 3 or 4 of these, however many you think. I think one more will do good for me, so I'll duplicate this one. I'm going to scale this one up a little bit, make it the biggest one, and I'll have it kind of rotated again a little bit from the front and sticking out a little bit from this. Yeah, kind of like that. Looks good. Okay, yeah, I like that a lot. All right, so now we are ready for the final step of Penguin Boy here, of modeling this character, and that is just some materials. So let's go into material preview. You can see he has no materials right now. So we'll start off, we'll make an eye material. So for eye material, I'm going to create a new material, and we're going to call this one eyes. And we'll make it very shiny. So I'll lower roughness down really low. Yep, there we go. Okay, I'm going to make a new beak material. So, new material slot. I'll call this one beak. And for now, I'm just going to set a base color that's kind of an orangish, yellowish color, something about like that. Easy to change this later if I decide I want something different. That looks pretty good. And I don't think the beaks are going to be real shiny. In fact, I'm going to turn up the roughness on the beak a little bit. I don't want it to be too shiny. And yep, that looks good. And I'll go ahead and also pick the beak out for that. All right, and the legs probably would be just fine. Right now, we'll just set them at beak and change it later. So eyebrows, these can be kind of fun. You can make these different colors. I'm gonna go ahead and just go with orange for now, like a really bright orange, something kind of like that. And make them, I'll just leave roughness for now. And then I'll use that same color for the hair. So I'm gonna go ahead and name that hair for now. It's kind of a, might change that later. We'll see what it looks like. Okay, and the other feather. All right, hair. Okay, so now I need to paint the body, and that's pretty easy. So I'm gonna do new material here, but we're gonna go ahead and set this as, clicking this yellow here on base color, set this as an image texture. I'm going to create a new image texture and call it Ping Body. That'll be just fine. And I'll hit OK. So Penguin Body is going to start off totally black, but this is going to let me paint him. So one last thing I want to do before I paint it is I want to pull out kind of a little bit of a tail feather. Right now, this is okay, but like Penguin might have a little bit of a rear end and a tail feather here. So I want to find kind of like the very center. So maybe I'll go by face select mode, and maybe right about here is kind of where I want the center of that to be. So I'll turn on proportional editing, make sure that's on. I'll go into my side view, and I'm just going to pull that out with proportional editing on, and just kind of pull it out and raise it up a little bit. I don't want to go crazy with this, not like a big huge tail feather, but just like give him a little bit of volume back here and shape it just a little bit. That looks pretty good. Okay, so to finish up materials, we need to paint the body, and to do that we need to UV unwrap it first. So I'm going to go to UV editing, and I'm going to make sure that I have everything selected. So A over here, make sure everything's selected. And I'm going to hit U to unwrap, and I'm going to use a Smart UV project. Now I got to make sure that no part of this is overlapping. So I'm going to turn on Island margined a little bit, like 2.2 or something, I think works fine. And if we hit OK, it's going to break up all our pieces, and no pieces should be overlapping. So if they're overlapping, like if that wing was on top, then you're going to be unable to paint it. So now we're ready to go to texture painting. Our texture painting is going to be real simple. I'm just going to pick a brush, white, so brush tool white, kind of small, but I want to make sure that I go down here and I have turned on where you find symmetry. You want X symmetry because I don't want to have to try to paint it perfect on both sides. So another thing you can also do if you want smoother is if you go to stroke, you can turn on stabilize stroke, and that's a little high, so something like 20 or 15 or something, and lower that factor down a little bit, maybe something like that, and that's going to help the stroke be a little bit smoother as you paint, kind of make sure it's not jittery. So I want to get the whole front. I'll just paint this all white so you can overlap like that, get that all done, and kind of connect it in the middle like that. That looks pretty good. Then you might also want to go check it from the side and give it a little attention from the side like this, kind of round that out. And yeah, that looks pretty good right there. Okay, so yeah, not perfect, but we'll take it. All right, so that's pretty much materials except for one last thing. We'll go back to check it out here. How about some eyeballs? We'll give him some eyeballs. So to do that, I'm going to select the eye, go in to edit mode because I'm going to need to color these individually. So on materials, I'm going to create a couple new material slots for the eye object, and I'm going to make one of them a new material, and we'll make it blue, something like that. Yep. And then for this third one, we'll make it pure black. So this one, I'll call it black, and I'm going to make it a black material. That's going to be the pupil, and I want to make sure that it is not rough at all, so I'll put it on 0. And I might go ahead and rename that instead of black, since I know what that's going to be. I'm going to call that pupil. So that's going to be pupil of the eye, and this one is going to be the iris. So I'll call it iris. There we go. And I want to make sure that it's shiny too. Okay, so this is really easy. I'm just going to box select and try to get that right there. I got to add shift, and there we go. Shift and click those guys. So I will pick out the iris color and assign that to be blue. And then I'll pick out that middle section right there and pick the pupil color and assign it that. So, okay, I got some basic eyes, got a beak, got the materials all done. Let's check him out here, back to object mode. Yep, eyes stick out just a little too much. So you can look at him now, see if you want to make any like kind of individual changes, put them eyes in a little bit, see if your eyebrows are actually like stuck on the body. Maybe they need to be rotated a little bit less, moved in a little bit. You want them to kind of overlap a little bit. You can make any final touches, but there he is. Play around with colors if you want. And that's finished Penguin Boy, the model.